Okay friends, it's time to get started on our job. One of the first things we have to do is safely raise and support the vehicle so the front end's off the ground. After that, remove all 5 of your lug nuts and then remove the wheel. We're just going to turn the wheel so we have complete access to this area right here. The next thing I want to do is relieve my jam nut. Now let's remove our outer tie rod end nut. Now we're going to use a hammer and hit right along this area of the knuckle. The vibration is going to break this free. The nut is to protect it from falling down and potentially hurting us. Now the next step is going to be very important. What you're going to want to do is count the outer tie rod end threads as we start to remove it. So every time I come completely around is 1, 2, and then so on. Keep track of that. 1, 2, 3, and then the same until it comes off. Next, we need to fully remove the jam nut. So to do that, I'm going to hold the inner tie rod end from spinning, and then we'll remove the nut. With the jam nut off of there, we're going to continue on up here. Just go ahead and use some long nose pliers and remove this clamp. Now the next thing we need to do is follow that bellows boot all the way into this inner portion here. There's going to be a metal clamp. Typically, you can reuse these if you carefully remove it. For me personally, I just break it off and then I replace it with a wire tie. I'm just going to get right along it with my pry bar. Give it a loving bonk to break it free. Clamp out of here. Now we can grab the boot, give it a little twist, and then we'll draw it away. If your boot's stuck on your tie rod, just take one of these tools so you can try to slide it in between. Just going to work that around. There it is, friends. Now it's time to prep our bellows boot. The first thing I want to do is take one of my wire ties and just get it started. I'm going to put it right over the boot like this, and then we can slide this over the rack. All right, let's go over the other side so we can turn the steering wheel the other direction. Now we're just going to take that bellows boot, slide it over the rack, and then we'll tighten up the wire tie. Now let's go ahead and tighten up that wire tie. Give it a little extra with some long nose pliers. And then cut off your excess. Now we're going to put on the outer portion. If you want to, you could use your original clamp, assuming it looks good, or of course just use a wire tie. Let's apply some copper never seize on the threads. Install your jam nut. Put that approximately halfway down. Now it's time to install our outer tie rod end. Now when you install this, you want to count the threads as you put it on. So the same amount of threads as it took to take it off, do the same putting it on. 1, 2, 3, and so on. Now let's put the outer tie rod end into our knuckle. Put on your tie rod end nut. Snug this up. And now torque it to 97 foot-pounds. Now the next thing you want to do is pay attention to the slots on the nut right here. You also want to pay attention to the stud. You should be able to find a hole in the stud. You want to line up the first slot to that hole. So if it doesn't line up, continue tightening until the very next one does. Now we need to put in our locking cotter pin. Make sure you pin it over so there's no way this nut can come loose on its own. Now the next thing we want to do is pay attention to the jam nut. Before we go ahead and tighten that up though, we want to take a look at this right here. Essentially, you want to make sure that your steering wheel is facing straight. And of course, once you have the wheel on here, you want it to be facing as straight as possible as well. If your wheel's turning outward like this, that means you're toed out. If it's turned in, it means you're toed in. The adjustment for that is made right here. You can either tighten or loosen this at that point. Once you're sure that this looks straight enough, let's continue on to bottoming out our jam nut. The torque for this should be 55 foot-pounds. If you don't have a torque wrench that can get on there, just go ahead and make sure it's nice and snug. Now we just want to straighten out the tie rod. You want to make sure that it's not kinked from one side or the other. Just make sure it's level. Now let's get the wheel back up on here. We'll start on all of our lug nuts, bottom them out, get the wheel so it's safely touching the ground, and then we'll torque these to 100 foot-pounds. Torqued. Okay friends, so that was an easy job. Now all you have left to do is safely road test your Jeep down to your local alignment shop.